So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a short span of time in around 20 to 30 minutes. Now, the purpose of this lecture series is very simple. You all know that current affairs form a very important portion of your civil services examination. In fact, 40 to 50% of your paper, whether that's prelims or mains, is directly or indirectly related to current affairs. Therefore, you cannot ignore current affairs at all. Plus, if you really want some grasp over your current affairs, then you need to cover them on a daily basis. But the problem is that you can't spend your entire day reading the newspaper. You can't spend your entire day covering the current affairs, right? You have to cover them in a short span of time. Therefore, to facilitate you guys, we have come out with this lecture series in which we'll finish off your entire day's current affairs in about 20 to 30 minutes. So within 20 to 30 minutes, you'll be done for the day as far as current affairs are concerned. But just watching this lecture would be job half done. After watching this lecture, you need to revise this lecture as well. And you can revise this lecture from the notes provided by us. These notes shall be available in PDF format and they shall be shared on our Telegram channel. Now, the link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section below. All you have to do is just click on that link. It'll take you to our Telegram channel and from there you can download the notes for this lecture. After downloading the notes, you just have to spend another 20 to 25 minutes revising this lecture. So 20 to 30 minutes of watching this lecture, 20 to 25 minutes of revising this lecture, and in about 50 minutes, you'll be done for the day. Okay, you'll be done for the day as far as current affairs are concerned. Now your entire day is free. Spend as you want to spend it. Okay, but as far as current affairs are concerned, you don't have to worry at all. Okay, please do not forget to revise these current affairs after watching the lecture because it is through revision only that you'll be able to consolidate these current affairs in your memory for longer periods of time. Okay, otherwise you'll forget them in a week or so. Okay, so this is the entire project that we have started through this lecture series. All right, enough of the introduction. Now let's straight away jump into the lecture. First, let's take a look at the topics we shall cover today. Okay, so here's the list of today's topics. Now, these topics are those important news items which featured in today's newspapers and are important from the perspective of our civil services examination. Number one is European Solar Mission. European Space Agency basically has launched a solar mission and they are launching it using ISRO's rockets. Okay, so it's basically a collaborative mission between ESA and ISRO. So we'll talk about this. Then an article featured in Indian Express which talked about India's trade deficit. What do we mean by trade deficit? Well, simply put, trade deficit means that we import goods more than we export. As you all know, while importing, we have to spend money, and while exporting, money. So, trade deficit actually measures the value by which your imports are more than your exports. Okay, so India has been running persistent trade deficit, but this article argues that this is not such a bad news as people project it to be. Okay, so we'll talk about this issue. Then, as you all know, that currently violence is taking place in Sambhal, and that is related to a survey of a mosque, right? Now, this brings into the picture Places of Worship Act 1991. We don't have to talk much about violence because questions related to violence won't be asked in your examination. But yes, the legal questions, especially the ones related to Places of Worship Act, might be asked. So we'll talk about this. And in the end, we'll talk about National Clean Air Program because recently, Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav responded to questions in the parliament, in Lok Sabha especially, regarding air pollution. So that is why during his response, National Clean Air Program came up, and that is why we have to discuss it. Okay, so the first topic is related to science and tech, which is GS3. The second is related to economy, which is GS3 again. Third is related to polity and Indian society. So GS1 and 2, both. And third is related to environment, which is again part of GS3. Okay, so these portions of your syllabus would get covered through these 4 news items. All right, let's begin our discussion, starting with topic number 1, which is European Solar Mission. Okay, so European Solar Mission by ISRO. Now, what do we mean by solar mission? Obviously, this mission aims to study the sun. Okay, so this mission by European Space Agency, right, is called Proba 3. And it is basically a satellite that would revolve around the Earth. But while revolving around the Earth, it will observe the sun. Okay, so it is a satellite mission called Proba 3 that is aimed to, or that has resolved to study the sun. So ISRO will launch the European Space Agency's Proba 3 mission on its PSLV rocket, Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. So ISRO has various rockets. PSLV is also known as ISRO's workhorse because it has launched many satellites and many missions of ISRO. So ISRO's most dependable rocket, PSLV, has been used for launching this mission by European Space Agency. Okay. Now this launch is going to take place from Sriharikota in December. Okay. Now the main aim of this solar mission is to study sun's corona. Okay. Or as we call it, solar corona. Now what is corona? Corona is the outermost layer of the sun. Okay. The outermost layer of the sun. Okay. You remember when we used to draw sun when we were kids, right? When we used to paint and draw pictures, right? So while we were kids, we used to draw sun like this. Remember? Right? So these rays that are coming out of the sun actually depict sun's corona. We didn't know about it back then because we were kids after all. But yes, these outer rays are sun's corona. Okay, so corona is the outermost layer of the sun. Corona is the hottest layer of the sun, mind you. Okay, and corona is also made up of plasma. Okay, you know states of matter? There are 5 states of matter: solid, liquid. Earlier we used to say there are only 3 states of matter: solid, liquid, gas. Then the 4th state of matter was discovered, which is called plasma, which is hot ionized gas, basically plasma. And the 5th state of matter was discovered, which was called Bose-Einstein condensate, but we'll talk about that later. So this entire sun's corona is made up of hot plasma. Okay, so the aim of this mission is to study solar corona, which is the hottest layer of sun, which is made up of plasma. All right, I hope you got that. Now let's talk about Proba 3. What is this mission all about? So basically, this mission will launch 2 satellites that would travel together. Okay, now if ISRO manages that, that would be a significant achievement, because to make 2 satellites very close to each other travel together in sync would be a big achievement. So this mission is designed with 2 satellites that will be launched together, separate from each other, and then they will fly in tandem. That means together. Okay, not linked by any physical link. They would just fly together. Okay, now the purpose of launching 2 satellites is that one satellite would act as a shield from sun's rays, because sun's rays are quite bright, so bright that it is very difficult for other instruments to see anything. So one satellite would act as a shield. That shield would protect this satellite, and then this satellite will open up its instruments to measure sun or to see solar corona. So basically the purpose of one satellite is to create solar eclipse like situation for this other satellite. Okay, then they will form a solar corona graph. So there will be a corona graph. Okay, this is an instrument that helps block out the bright light emitted by the sun to reveal the objects and an atmosphere around it. So basically both these 2 satellites will form a corona graph. Okay, and from there 3 instruments are aboard the spacecraft which would observe the sun. Now the estimated cost of this satellite is 200 million and its lifespan is 2 years. Proba 3 will have a highly elliptical orbit. You know, there are circular orbits, then there are elliptical orbits, right? So it will have a highly elliptical orbit, 600 kilometers above the Earth to 60,530 kilometers above the Earth. Okay, and its orbital period, that means how much time does it take to complete one revolution of the Earth, would be 19.7 hours. Okay, so this is some basic information regarding Proba 3. We need some more information. Okay, so we'll talk more about Proba 3. So Proba 3, the reason why it is called 3, basically Proba is a series of missions by European Space Agency to observe the sun. Okay, ESA at one point of time in 2001 launched Proba 1, which was again launched by ISRO's rocket, and then they launched Proba 2. So Proba 3 is a successor to Proba 1 and Proba 2. Okay, now Proba 3, like I've mentioned before, will contain 2 satellites moving together. One is the occulter spacecraft. This is the spacecraft that will create the eclipse-like situation. It will shield the other spacecraft, which is the coronagraph spacecraft. Okay, so this occulter will mimic a solar eclipse, because through solar eclipse you'll be able to observe the sun better. And it makes sense also. You know, you can't directly observe the sun. Okay, you can go outside, go on your house's rooftop, and you can try observing the sun. You can't observe the sun with naked eye. But during solar eclipse, you can somehow, because sun's light gets a bit dimmer, right? So that is the purpose of this entire mission. Okay. Now it has three instruments. One is Association of Spacecraft for Polarimetric and Imaging Investigation of Corona of Sun, (ASPICS). This will view solar corona. Then Digital Absolute Radiometer, DARA. This will measure the total energy output of sun. And third is 3D Energetic Electron Spectrometer, 3Ds. This will basically measure the electrons emitted by sun and those electrons that come near the earth, right, and create radiation belts. So to observe the impact of these radiation belts on earth is this 3Ds. Okay, that's all. That's about it. That's all you need to know about Proba 3. Now, one more thing. Why is ISRO launching Proba 3? What benefits ISRO seeks from this mission? First of all, these launch services provided by ISRO, these rocket services provided by ISRO, are not for free. Space agencies all over the world pay a hefty amount for this. So ISRO will earn some money out of it, of course. This is basically export of space services from ISRO, right? The next part is to demonstrate. ISRO wants to demonstrate its capabilities. What type of capabilities? Of launching satellites and spacecrafts. Okay, because if ISRO is able to demonstrate its capabilities of launching satellites, and that too for very cheap, that too for very low cost as compared to other space agencies, right? So ISRO is basically trying to demonstrate that it can launch your satellite for very cheap cost. Okay, now what would this do? This demonstration would make others look for ISRO. Okay, and ISRO will be able to capture this huge space launch market. There is a huge market. Most of it is captured by Elon Musk's SpaceX and many other space agencies, but ISRO also wants some share of this market. So through this demonstration, ISRO is trying to achieve that. And third purpose is ISRO also wants to collaborate. Indian scientists want to collaborate with European scientists as is concerned. So the data from Proba 3 and the data from ISRO's own mission called Mission Aditya L1, both these data would be collated, collaborated, and studied together. This is what ISRO is hoping. So these are the three benefits that India is seeking out of this mission. Okay, all right. Now let's move on to our second topic of the day, which is a bit technical, but bear with me. I'll try to explain it as easily as possible. Okay. Now this article is about India's persistent trade deficit. So first, let's talk about the argument made by this author of the article. Okay. So what this article says is that India has a persistent trade deficit. Now, what is trade deficit? India has imports, and India's imports are more than its exports. So the amount by which India's imports exceed India's exports is known as trade deficit. Let's suppose India imports worth $100 billion and exports worth $60 billion. So India's trade deficit would be $40 billion. Right? So this is trade deficit. Now, India's persistent trade deficit, that means imports more goods than it exports, is often seen as a weakness of Indian manufacturing. And it is seen as weakness of Indian manufacturing because it means that India's manufacturing sector is not able to manufacture enough goods to satiate the demands of Indian people. That is why Indian people have to resort to importing, right? Had India produced enough for its own people, then we wouldn't have imported that much. So India's manufacturing is not producing enough. Okay. And if India was like China, the manufacturing giant, India would have exported more. Okay. So trade deficit is basically seen as a weakness of India's manufacturing. And that is why it has always been the aim of finance ministry to bridge this gap, to reduce trade deficit to as low as possible. But this author argues that trade deficit is not a bad thing, not as much a bad thing as people make it out to be. Okay. Now, first of all, we import certain goods, we export certain goods. There is one more thing. We import some services also. We export some services also. Now, trade deficit over here measures just import and export of goods only. Remember this part. Trade deficit only measures goods deficit. Import and export of only goods. It doesn't measure import and export of services. Okay. This article shows that yes, we run a trade deficit as far as goods are concerned, but we run a trade surplus as far as services are concerned. So it is not that much of a bad news because we have a comparative advantage in services. We export a lot of services and we import very few services. So yes, we are more better positioned as far as services are concerned, but we are worse off as far as goods are concerned. So if we shouldn't be that pessimistic about India. Plus, it is because of this trade deficit, India has a lot of foreign investment. And this article tries to make that connection. That trade deficit actually invites foreign investment. Now, how is that possible? Okay. Now, for that, you need to understand one concept called balance of payment, BOP. Now, what is basically balance of payment? Balance of payment actually measures the inflow of money into India and the outflow of money into India. Okay, inflow of money. So if India imports a lot of goods, it has to give money out to other countries, right? So that is outflow of money. If India is exporting a lot of goods, then it is receiving money by selling those goods abroad, right? So there is inflow of money. Then various Indians work abroad, they send money to their family members, that is inflow of money. Then various foreign investments, FDI, FII come to India, that is inflow of money. So balance of payments basically captures the total inflow of money into India, that can be from anything, and total outflow of money from India. Okay, that can be from anything. Okay, now this balance of payment is divided into two accounts. One is called current account, the other is called capital account. Now current account actually has another two components. Okay, one is called trade balance. Listen to me carefully. Okay, trade balance actually measures import and exports of goods only goods, no services. Okay, so it will measure that the import was $100 billion, it will write $100 billion. Export was $60 billion, it will write $60 billion of export in goods. Then there is this invisibles balance. Why is it called invisibles? Because it contains services. Services are invisible, right? Goods are something that you can see, touch, and feel. You cannot touch and feel services. How will you touch and feel financial services? How will you touch and feel technical services? How will you touch and feel transport services? Okay, you can touch and feel trucks, but you can't touch and feel transport service, right? So it is called invisibles. So import of services is listed down here, export of services is listed down here. Okay, then there are some transfer payments like remittances. Remittances are what? Indians working abroad send money home. Then we receive some grants from UNICEF and whatnot. Okay, and we also give some grants to other countries. All of this is listed down in India's current account. Okay, so if India imports more goods than it exports, we say India runs a deficit on its trade balance. We call it trade deficit. Okay, but if India runs overall a deficit in its current account, that means more money goes out of India in current account than it comes, then we say India runs a current account deficit. Okay, if it runs only a trade deficit, that means we import more goods. But if India imports services, India does not receive much remittances, more grants, then overall we run a current account deficit. Okay, so this is current account. Then there is capital account, which includes borrowings, like we borrow from World Bank, IMF, Bank of England, and it includes foreign investments, FDI, FII, and whatnot. Okay, so if money overall in current account is going out on net terms, then we say current account deficit. In the overall balance of payment, if there is net outflow of money, then we'll say we have balance of payment deficit. If there is net inflow of money, then we say balance of payment surplus. Similarly, capital account deficit, current account deficit, current account surplus. All right, that makes sense. Now, let me make it very clear. What is India's situation? It is said that India runs a trade deficit, but it runs a services surplus. But India's services surplus is not enough to completely consume its trade deficit, and that is why it runs an overall deficit in its current account. So India's trade deficit is around $100 billion, and that is minus $100 billion, and India's services surplus is, let's suppose, plus $20 billion. So yes, India is running a trade deficit. India is running a services surplus, but overall in current account, India is running a deficit of minus 80. Right? This is the situation. Okay. Now, this article argues that yes, many people are saying that India runs a huge trade deficit and a huge overall current account deficit, and that is bad news for India. But they say that it is not such a bad news. Why? Because yes, India runs a current account deficit, but India tries to keep its balance of payment neutral, neither deficit nor surplus. Okay. So if we are running a current account deficit, then to keep overall balance of payment neutral, some money should come in capital account. And this money comes in the form of foreign investment. So if there is a high current account deficit, chances are that there will be a high capital account surplus, and that surplus would mostly come from foreign investment, FDI, FII. And FDI is something that we need. We need foreign investment in our country to grow our economy. So yes, current account deficit is bad, but it is not that bad. Okay, because it also invites foreign direct investment. And this is the argument made by this article. Okay, it says that India has a high current account deficit. Okay, an inflow of funds has to be matched by an outflow or an accumulation of funds. Basically, an outflow through current account deficit has to be matched by an inflow through capital account, and that comes from foreign investment. Therefore, capital account inflows will equal the sum of current account deficit. Okay, and if capital account has so much surplus, foreign investment is so much that it overall subsumes current account deficit and also gives us some extra money, then that would give a rise to forex reserve. What I mean by that is that let's suppose capital account surplus is $200 billion and current account deficit is minus $160 billion. That means in the balance of payment, we have a surplus of $40 billion. That goes to our foreign exchange reserves, which is also good news. Okay. So a deficit in current account is not that bad a thing. But yes, we need to keep current account deficit in check. Obviously, we cannot allow current account deficit to go in as much deficit as possible. That would be bad. We need a healthy current account deficit, but we shouldn't say that we shouldn't have current account deficit. We should always have current account surplus, because current account deficit also has its perks and privileges, that is foreign investment. Okay. Plus, trade deficit is bad news in India, but services trade brings good news in India. Overall, our current account is in deficit because of our heavy trade deficit. But in India, India is a net exporter of services. So India runs a trade deficit, but India runs a services trade surplus. Though that trade surplus, services surplus is not enough to compensate completely trade deficit, and that is why current account is in deficit. But still, we are a champion of services. We are a net exporter of services, and here is India's comparative advantage, and we should capitalize on this comparative advantage that we are the net service provider to the world. So we should not be that sad about it. All right, that's all. That was in the news. Yes, if you haven't covered economics as a subject for your civil services preparation, you might find this article difficult. Don't worry. As soon as you will finish economics as a subject, you'll understand this article way more. For beginners, I've tried to make this article as much understandable as possible. I'm sure those who have studied economics would have understood it. But those who are beginners, don't worry. Be patient. When economics would get over, you'll understand this. Okay? All right. Topic number 3, which is Places of Worship Act 1991. Now, why was this in news? Recently, a court ordered that Shahi Jama Masjid of Sambhal should allow Archaeological Survey of India to survey its area, okay, and check whether it is built upon a Hindu temple or not. Okay, but as soon as the survey members arrived on this Jama Masjid and police came on this Jama Masjid, people gathered from the minority community and they protested, and it led to violence, and it created a lot of ruckus in this area, a lot of violence. Now, we are familiar with these issues that masjids are built on Hindu temples and people are angry about it. Some people say that let it be, but some people say no, we cannot let it be. We have to correct the past wrongs, and this has been a raging debate. Similar claims that masjids have been built upon Hindu temples have been made in Varanasi, Gyanvapi Masjid, Shahi Idgah of Mathura, that it is built on a Krishna temple. In Varanasi, it is said that Kashi Vishwanath was desecrated and Gyanvapi Mosque was made. Kamal Maula Mosque in Madhya Pradesh, Dhar. So similar claims have been made. Now, all these claims go contrary to a law made by Parliament in 1991, which is Places of Worship Act. All these claims go contrary to that. How? For that, you need to understand Places of Worship Act. Okay, so what is Places of Worship Act? First of all, Places of Worship Act states that the religious character of certain places of worship, of all places of worship, would remain the same as it existed on 15th August 1947. So, the religious character of this place is that of a mosque. And it was the case on 15th August 1947. So, it won't be changed. Okay. Before 1947, had it been challenged, then then there could have been an exception. But all those places of worship which have a religious character, that is whether they follow Muslim form of worship or Hindu form of worship or Christian form of worship, right? Religious character. The religious character that was on August 15, 1947 would stay the same. No one has the right to change it. So you cannot say that it was built on a Hindu temple that was destroyed by Aurangzeb, so we have a right to change its religious character. You cannot, because its religious character was a masjid on August 15, 1947. This is what Places of Worship Act states. Okay. In fact, Section 3 completely bars changing or conversion of the religious character of a place. Okay. There is just one exception to it, and that exception was Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi dispute, because it was also the same dispute that there was a Ram temple there and it was destroyed to create Babri Masjid. So this Places of Worship Act excluded Babri Masjid from it. That means Babri Masjid's religious character can be changed. Okay, except Babri Masjid, no other place's religious character would be changed as far as Places of Worship Act is concerned. So all these claims made in Sambhal, Kashi Vishwanath, Mathura, all these claims go contrary to Places of Worship Act. Now, if these claims are contrary to Places of Worship Act, then why is the court allowing surveys in these areas? In fact, ordering surveys in these areas, because ordering surveys in these areas would mean an attempt to change the religion of that place. Right? Then why is court entertaining petitions regarding a temple beneath the mosque? Right? The reason why court is entertaining these petitions, despite the fact that Places of Worship Act bans them to, is because there has been a constitutional challenge to Places of Worship Act itself in 1991. Petitions have been filed in Supreme Court which challenge the constitutional validity of Places of Worship Act. Many petitions have been filed which say that Places of Worship Act is unconstitutional, therefore it should be declared null and void. And those petitions are still going on in Supreme Court. So that matter hasn't been decided. Supreme Court will take a call whether Places of Worship Act is constitutional or not. So because that matter is sub judice, it is going on. That is why these petitions are entertained. In fact, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud in 2022 said that yes, Section 3 of Places of Worship Act bans changing religious character of a place, but just conducting a survey doesn't mean you're destroying the mosque and building a temple. You're just conducting a survey to know whether it's built upon a mandir or not. Right? So just conducting a survey is not wrong. And because of that, many courts have entertained petitions and have ordered surveys of these areas. Because Places of Worship Act itself is being constitutionally challenged. That is why this dispute is going on. All right. And our last news item is related to National Clean Air Program. Well, a question was posed to Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav in Lok Sabha, and that was related to air pollution in various urban cities. Bhupendra Yadav said that National Clean Air Program has been going on and has achieved a lot of success. It has reduced air pollution by quite a lot in various urban areas. Okay. Under National Clean Air Program, around 130 cities were selected. 97 of them have showed improvement in air quality. Right? So this is what Union Environment Ministry says about National Clean Air Program. Now, what is National Clean Air Program? Okay. So it was launched by Environment Ministry in 2019, and it is the first ever effort in the country to frame a national framework for air quality management. Plus, it is the first ever framework to reduce air pollution by time-bound targets. Okay. So time-bound targets are given to reduce air pollution. So for example, one target is to cut the concentration of particulate matter 10 and particulate 2.5 by 20 to 30% by 2024 as compared to 2017. Okay. And this National Clean Air Program is there, or it has selected 130 cities where this program would be implemented. Now, these 130 cities are selected on the basis of their poor air quality. And the selection was made by Central Pollution Control Board based on their air pollution levels as per national ambient air quality standards. Okay, on the basis of the standards, that what should be the standard of good air quality. On the basis of that, these 130 cities have been selected by CPCB. Now, what is National Ambient Air Quality Standards? So basically, these are standards for ambient air quality. Ambient means good air quality. Okay, with reference to various identified pollutant notified by CPCB under Air Pollution Act. Okay, now the list of air pollutants identified by NAAQS is PM10, PM2.5, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, ammonia, ozone, lead, benzene, benzopyrene, arsenic, nickel. So it has basically identified 12 pollutants, and these 12 pollutants need to be reduced as per NAAQS. All right. And on that note, we finish today's lecture. We conclude today's lecture. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And please do not forget, I'm reminding you again, please do not forget to revise these current affairs from our notes provided on Telegram channel, because it is only through revision that you'll be able to remember these current affairs for longer periods of time. So make sure you spend another 20 to 25 minutes revising these current affairs. On that note, I'll sign off. Thank you so much, everyone.